Dr. French. It's always so amazing to hear from you, and it gives us so much hope when we hear about, what's going on in the field. So we have lots of questions for you. I hope you plan on staying a bit.
No worries.
And actually, I'm going to skip ahead to a question that just came in because it's directly related to your statement about clinical trials. And someone wanted to know, how can they find out about clinical trials?
So there is a site called clintrials.gov that they can go to, and they can search under epilepsy, and they can find the trials that are going on, and you can filter them by location, so you can see if there are hospitals near you. You can always reach out to us at NYU. We have many trials going on, and as do the other major medical centers in the I don't know where this person lives, but all around New York there are clinical trials going on. They should also ask their clinician, their physician, whether they are involved in any clinical trials or whether there are any clinical trials that they could recommend.
Great. So we have a question here about cenobamate, and is it approved for patients under the age of 18?
Not at the moment, but I think that those studies are underway. The FDA now doesn't require special studies in children in order to increase the number of or decrease the age at which drugs can be given. They just have to do studies to make sure that it is safe and they know that the titration is appropriate for children. I will say that many physicians will probably prescribe it under the age of 18, particularly for teenagers. That's called off-label prescribing, and we do it all the time. There is no law that says that you can't prescribe medicines in a way that's different than what the FDA has approved medicines for, and some physicians will have a great deal of experience and ease in giving these medications to children.
Is anyone researching medical cannabis and its effectiveness in reducing seizures?
Oh, yes. So medical cannabis comprises a lot of different things. So probably that cannabidiol, or CBD, is already approved for use under the trade name Epidiolex, and it is approved for many pediatric epilepsy syndromes, including Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, including Dravet syndrome, including seizures associated with tuberous sclerosis, and it is often given in other pediatric syndromes by physicians as well. People can also obtain, obviously, CBD or other cannabis products in other ways from local dispensaries. If people have if their physician has a license to prescribe it that way. There was a study of CBD in adults with focal epilepsy. It was given in a different way. It was a topical CBD, so that you actually put it, you rubbed it in on your skin, but it got absorbed through the skin and made a reasonable, there was a reasonable amount in the bloodstream. And unfortunately, that trial was negative. So we don't have any evidence yet that that CBD, or cannabidiol, is effective for focal epilepsy, although it may not have been a high enough dose. And now there are many, many companies that are trying to develop new ways to get CBD into the body, because the way that we do it now with the oil, it may not get up to the amount in the bloodstream that we would like to see, and it has other problems. So those trials will be upcoming. And then the other issue is whether the other parts of medical cannabis, which are THC, CBD doesn't make you high, but THC does make you high. So obviously, we're less excited about giving that to children and perhaps to adults as well. But there are people who believe that a little bit of THC along with CBD might be more effective. There aren't right now any trials with THC. but it may be that trials will come up in the future. So I hope I answered the question that the person had in mind.
Yes. There was a question that came up earlier in the morning that we didn't get to answering, but I thought it might be a good question for you as well. And that was a question about the ketogenic diet, and is there any future in a pill form of the ketogenic diet?
So not necessarily a pill form, but people are absolutely focusing on trying to reproduce the effects of the ketogenic diet without people having to be on a special diet. So there is a company that is developing, again, it's an oil, and it does replace a certain amount of the calories that people would eat in a day. And I think that the initial development is going to be in young children for specific syndromes, but that's a start. And then another company actually called Bloom that I didn't talk about today is making a probiotic, which is changes the flora in your gut. And some people believe that the effects of the ketogenic diet in some part may be due to the effects of the ketogenic diet on your gut flora. And therefore changes in flora would again reproduce the effects, and they've done that in mice, and they have reproduced the effects of the ketogenic diet in mice, and now they're moving to humans. So there are various ways in which people are studying the ketogenic diet in a non-diet way.
Oh, interesting. What is involved in genetic testing for patients?
Well, I'm happy to say that there are now companies, for example, Invitae is one of them, that will provide genetic testing for children with epilepsy at no cost to the family. So basically what's involved is you ask your physician, can I get genetic testing? The physician recommends what kind of genetic testing might be appropriate. It is a blood draw. Again, most of the time you could get it without cost. But it may take multiple weeks before the results come back. There are certain groups of patients where it makes more sense to get genetic testing than in others. So for example, if you have focal epilepsy and you know that you had a head trauma that caused it, or a brain tumor or an infection or something like that, then it may not make sense to get genetic testing because it's pretty clear where the epilepsy came from. But in other circumstances, particularly when epilepsy began at a very young age, particularly when there is developmental delay associated with epilepsy, then it may make a lot of sense.
And I'm sorry, did you give a name to the company that is giving those free genetic testing?
Yeah, and it may not be for everybody. It's for
Right.
specific syndromes they may give it, but it's
Right.
INVITAE, Invitae. And then if Invitae won't pay for the testing, depending on the age and other things, then you really should ask your physician how much is it going to cost in order to get the testing.
Great, thank you. Let's see. We have someone asked, how do you wean yourself off of Keppra XR?
You don't wean yourself. You should always do it under medical care. And your doctor should advise you on how to do it.
There was another question earlier today about vitamins and how important is it to look at vitamin levels, and also with relation to vitamin D in particular.
So there are some anti-seizure medicines, particularly the older medications, such as Dilantin or phenytoin, carbamazepine, Tegretol, phenobarbital, that can reduce the amount of vitamin D because it sort of revs up those drugs rev up your liver, and it's not unhealthy for the liver. People can take those for a long time, but it does change the way the liver then handles every other drug that is given, and also some of the things that your body produces, such as vitamin D. And so when you're taking those drugs, it is really important to get vitamin D levels and to take vitamin D supplementation, and also to do testing of the bones, because vitamin D makes your bones strong, because some of those drugs may increase the risk of sort of brittle bones or osteopenia.
And let's see, what is your professional opinion on what number of seizures qualifies a cluster?
That's a question that has been debated and debated and debated. And nobody can come up with a specific definition of a cluster, because a cluster is really very specific to a given person. So, for example, I mean, a cluster that should be treated with medication is different than a cluster full stop. So, for example, there may be some people who have no seizures for 2 to 3 weeks, and then they have 3 to 4 seizures over a week, and then they have no more seizures for 2 to 3 weeks again, or 4 weeks, or even 3 months. And that's a cluster of sorts, but it probably is not worth treating that cluster with a rescue medication such as a benzodiazepine, because it wouldn't work long enough if the seizures are just happening once a day for 3 days, for example. On the other hand, there are some people who have clusters where they have a seizure every half hour, and there are some people who have a seizure every minute. Those would be the type of clusters that would be more amenable to taking a rescue medication.
If a medication is available or approved in Europe, do patients have access to it?
No, they don't until the FDA approves it. They could, do some very complicated thing where they get a doctor to prescribe it in Europe and then it gets mailed. But interestingly enough, whereas probably 20 years ago, there was a pattern where drugs were approved in Europe first and then approved in the United States, that hasn't happened so much. We have devices that are approved in Europe that aren't available in the United States. But I am actually not aware of a drug that was approved. I think the last one was stiripentol, but that's now approved in the United States. So I think by and large, the drugs that are available in Europe are also available here. Buccal midazolam also was not available in the United States, but now we have forms of midazolam here. So I think pretty much everything that's available in Europe is available here.
Going back to CBD, does CBD interact with prescribed anti-epileptic medications?
Absolutely, yes. There are a number of medications that have very significant interactions with CBD, including, like, probably the most important one is a drug called clobazam, which is a benzodiazepine. That's why we say that, even though CBD is available, you can go to Walmart and get CBD. It is not wise to use these drugs except after consultation with your physician, because you can really get into trouble with these drug interactions. For example, the interaction with clobazam, when you add CBD, the levels of clobazam go up. So you have more clobazam in your body. And since clobazam has a tendency to make people sleepy, this can make you very, very sleepy, to the point where some of the kids, before this was known, would actually, get so sleepy that they would aspirate and get aspiration pneumonia and end up in the hospital. So really important to talk to your physician before starting CBD.
My son did a saliva test for genetic testing. Does one need a blood draw to get a full genetic workup?
I think that a blood draw is better, but I honestly don't know the answer to that question. You should ask your clinician whether, whether there was a full genetic assessment.
Okay. So someone was asking to confirm the name of the company for genetic testing, and it is Invitae. We'll put it into the chat in a second. I'll type it in.
It's in the chat. It's in the chat.
Oh, okay, great.
Sherry answered
Oh,
in
yeah, there you
Vitae.
go. Okay, wonderful, thank you. Let's see, should one be taking vitamins when taking Keppra?
There are some vitamin B vitamins that are recommended when taking Keppra, particularly if you're having some side effects of irritability, which lots of people do have. It may help. It may help. It may not help, but it may help. B6.
Okay. That seems to be the end of the questions that I have here. I'll give everyone a minute if they have anything else that they haven't had a chance to type in yet.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to
Looks like that's
yeah,
it. Someone
all right.
questioned B6.
Yeah, B6. Yeah.
Is that
All right.
is B6 something
Yeah,
that should be
B6.
taken?
Yes, B6.
Okay. All right.